This is Robert Harper with Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division. Glad to bring you the Merchandiser Minute for Friday, November the 6th, 2020. And we saw $11 beans on the futures market this week on the nearby Chicago futures contract, the January futures contract. And in a week where there were a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainties around COVID, around the presidential election, we still see fundamentals of supply and demand dictating how the commercials and how the speculators want to trade bean futures. We've got a lot of uncertainty priced into these futures markets now. And that's basically saying the same thing that I just said, wrapped up around COVID, wrapped up around COVID food insecurity and uncertainty in politics and domestic monetary policy. But those uncertainties are priced in, and we've seen another week where positive futures prices in many areas on the futures market is helping you and helping your bottom line. Let's take a look at how those futures closed out for the week. We've got December corn up 8 cents for the week to close at $4.06. We've got January beans up 45 cents a bushel for the week to close, and that's yes at $11.01. And we've got July wheat up 13 cents a bushel for the week. Your new crop contract, July 2021, to close at $6.05. I think we have to go back to the spring of 2014 since we've seen $11 on the bean futures. So we're really thankful for that. And we'll talk about some of those influences. We know it's a La Nina year in South America. You can check out a lot of information online that shows the temperatures in the Pacific Ocean around the equator being as cold as they've been in about 10 years. We know that that's the start of a La Nina event in dry weather in South America, lower half of North America. And when you look back over La Nina years, most recently 2017, we know that that adds a lot more volatility into the futures trade and has generally driven prices higher. So we are in a weather market, and we know we never know where the top is in a rally when weather has anything to do with it. We saw a strong rebound this week after the election on crude oil as we're heading back up to $40 a barrel. It's not as much as it used to be, but we still know there's a correlation between crude oil and corn futures. So we like to see it from that perspective trending higher. Corona was in the news again this week as the United States broke records here for number of cases being diagnosed or testing positive each day. It seemed like in many ways, from my perspective, this is becoming, I guess, priced into the news cycle, and the futures markets, for what you and I pay attention to, aren't reacting as sharply to those numbers as they were just even a few months ago. We saw Saudi Arabia, and we saw Egypt this week. A lot of rumors in the trade that they're in the market for wheat. That helped us this week with that 13 cent a bushel uptick on the futures board. We did get a slightly bearish ethanol report on Wednesday from the government with both an uptick in production and a slight uptick in stocks. I noticed yesterday December ethanol futures closed at $1.35 a gallon. The managed money speculator still holds a really large, long position in corn, wheat, and beans. We'll see how much length they added to that when we get the Commitment of Traders report this afternoon. Remember, that means they're still telling you that they're betting on prices going higher before they're going lower when they're net long or net bought futures. We still have world corn values pointing all interested buyers to the U.S. That's a really good thing. We talked some about last week how in Brazil and in China, domestic corn prices there are at or near all-time highs. That's telling us that they don't have a lot of corn left, and we know going forward they're going to be buying out of necessity. Let's see, we are in the delivery month for November soybeans. I've noticed from some reports we get from Farm Bureau's broker that there has been a lack of interest in physically delivering on those beans, and that shows that the end user, in some ways this can be taken that the end user has the production, the bushels that they need. But at the same time, we still have basis strong along the Mississippi and Illinois rivers, And boy, do we have strong basis for soybeans here in Virginia. Call me or call Josie directly to talk about that. It's a good conversation. The rumors for 2 weeks that U.S. beans, there was interest for U.S. beans going to Brazil came true. We got confirmation this week that a bulk vessel at a port in Louisiana was loading beans for Brazil. That's a big story. A lot to dig into there. We can talk more about that, but obviously that's positive for the United States. You know, we were talking last Friday coming into this week about the election. What would the reaction to that be? And it really seemed by even Wednesday afternoon that the trade was looking through the election already towards more supply and demand fundamentals. We did get a big newswire on the 4th this week from the Foreign Ag Service saying that China's corn imports will estimate to hit 22 million metric tons this year. USDA had that number at 7. So we see just an amazing increase in what our government thinks China is going to buy this year from us in a corn perspective. So obviously that's very bullish to price as well. Let's take a look at some of the USDA numbers in closing. We did have flash sales this week for corn and for sorghum. U.S. corn is seen at 82% harvested. U.S. beans at 87% harvested. And we had an excellent sales report on Thursday for corn, again, backing up all this demand. 102 million bushels were sold, and our 10-week average was 54 million bushels. So big corn sales for the previous week. Next week is all about November the 10th. On Tuesday at noon Eastern, we'll get the November crop report, and we've got a few estimates here that are out and being published. Y'all can take a look at those, but just know there'll be some volatility on Tuesday at noon when the November crop report gets released. South American weather will be very important next week. It's still dry. This is Robert at Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division.